Hi everybody, Mrs. Tavari here, aka Rockin' Librarian, and today we're going to be using a nonfiction book in the history section, and I'm going to show you where you can find it. Let me share my screen. And here I have ClassLink opened. And of course, on ClassLink, we can do a couple of different things. We can go to our Destiny Library catalog, and I'm going to open my school, my home-based school, Cold Harbor. You open your school. And I'm going to open the catalog and I'm going to type in dazzled ships and see what comes up. And there we go. Dazzled Ship, World War I and the Art of Confusion. I did tell you this was in the nonfiction section, so if I wanted to go to the library, I would look at this call number. I'm going to highlight this right here. And it says 940.4 BAR. And of course, you know BAR is for the author's last name, the first three letters of the author's last name. And it looks like there's one of two available in this library. So that's one way you could check this book out and read it on your own. I'm going to go back to ClassLink. I'm going to see if it's on Overdrive. I do not see my Overdrive button. There it is, Overdrive, Sora. I don't know if Hanover County has purchased this, but I could check. Let's see. Search for a book up here. I'm going to type in Dazzled Ships. Push enter. Let's see. No matches. No luck there. Another thing we can do is go to the Pamunkey Regional Library. That's the library system near you. And here we go. And I'm not logged in yet. You might need to get a card and create a card, but I'm going to log in, and my PIN and everything is already in there. And I'm going to go to Digital Library, and I'm going to use either their Overdrive or Hoopla. So these are free to you. I'm going to open Overdrive, and I am going to type in Dazzled Ships again. And search it, and there you go. Now, technically, I already borrowed the book, so I have it borrowed. There is another copy available. So if you go today to check out, you might say there's only one available, even digitally, because right now I have this book loaned out. But another one this says audio down here. That means you can only listen to the book. So this is the one. But I will check it back in and you can check it out too. I'm going to go to my loans page and see it there. And it says that I have this book for, let's see, it expires in 7 days. So I only have 7 days to read it. But remember, I think I told you about ebook etiquette, which means this. There's only one copy of this at the Pamunkey Library, even digitally. So when I'm done reading it, I want to check it back in. I'm going to return the book here and check it back in so you can check it out. I'm not going to hold it 7 days if I'm not reading it. That would not be very nice to our friends, right? So here's our book, Dazzled Ships, on the Pamunkey Regional Library Overdrive. And I went to my loans, and there we go. I like to do my pre-reading strategies first. Read the title, read the cover. Dazzled Ships, World War I and the Art of Confusion, written by Chris Barton and illustrated by Victor Nye. And I like to also read the description. A visual, stunning look at the innovative and eye-popping measures used to protect ships during World War I. During World War I, British and American ships were painted with bold colors and crazy patterns from bow to stern. Why would anyone put such eye-catching designs on a ship? Desperate to protect ships from German torpedo attacks, British Lieutenant Commander Norman Wilkinson proposed what became known as Dazzle. These stunning patterns and colors were meant to confuse the enemy about a ship's speed and direction. By the end of the war, more than 4,000 ships have been painted with these mesmerizing designs. Author Chris Barton and illustrator Victor Nye vividly brings to life this little-known story of how the unlikely and the improbable became just plain dazzling. Makes me want to read it. Here we go. I'm going to go to my loans and see if we can open this up here. I'm going to read in browser since I'm on my computer. There's the end page. End pages kind of get us ready for the book, and it's, some people call this cubism art. Title page, Dazzled Ships, War I and the Art of Confusion, written by Chris Barton, illustrated by Victor Nye. The publisher is at the bottom, of course, Millbrook Press in Minneapolis. Now, there's a lot of side notes. I'm not going to be reading the side notes out loud, but you can go back and check out this book yourself and read some of the side notes. But of course, look at the beautiful two-page spread. There's a seam here, two-page spread of the book. Here we go. One of these ships on this page is painted in a sneaky, stripy camouflage. You probably can't see it. Oh, you can see it? The ship was an Allied vessel used during World War I, and it was camouflaged so strangely for a reason. More than 1,200 U.S. ships were decked out this way, and so many more than twice as many ships in the British fleet. The idea was to make these ships harder for the German torpedoes to sink. That's right, harder. What were they thinking? What were they thinking? Because to me, the way they painted it made it more vivid to see in the ocean than hiding them. A camouflage, the word camouflage means. Well, an old saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures. World War I, which lasted from 1914 to 1918, was one of the largest wars the world had seen. Many nations were involved, including Germany on one side and the United Kingdom, and eventually the United States on the other. So here's a little bit of a map. The United Kingdom, here's France. Allied power was in green, Central power, the red. I love the key down here. German submarines, known as U-boats, were attacking and sinking ships in the Britain's Royal Navy. The U stood for undersea boat or undersea boat. They were also sinking other ships carrying all kinds of things, including food. As an island nation, British depended on goods arriving by sea. Too few boats were reaching Britain, and food was running out. The country might have to surrender so its people could eat. Submarines and torpedoes they fired were big changes in the way wars were fought. Never before could an enemy hide beneath the waves and attack from a mile away. A U-boat crew would use its periscope to quickly peek above the surface of the water, pick a target, and launch a torpedo towards the spot where its target was going to be in a minute or so. Torpedoes were slower back then, but they were deadly. The sinking ships, especially non-fighting ships, without any warning, was new too. In the early years of the war, Germany limited which ships its U-boats attacked. But in early 1917, it saw a chance to win the war by starving Britain, its strongest opponent. This woman symbolizes Britain, people hungry with empty bowls, and the ships carrying the food not being able to get to Britain because Germany was sinking them. Britain tried different things to stop the submarine attacks. There was talk of training seagulls and sea lions to spot the subs and having swimmers smash U-boat periscopes with hammers. The British started having their supply ships sit close together and sail in convoys guarded by armed vessels. The Royal Navy began using depth charges, 300-pound underwater weapons that would explode when they sank to certain levels to damage or destroy U-boats. And the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve Lieutenant Commander named Norman Wilkinson had another suggestion. It was unlikely, it was improbable, it may have even seemed bonkers. His idea was to camouflage ships. Wilkinson's responsibilities included patrolling the waters of the southwestern England and sweeping for mines. He saw a lot of ships as part of his job. One Monday morning, after a weekend away spent fishing, he was headed back to work when inspiration struck. I suddenly got an idea that since it was impossible to paint a ship so that it could not be seen by submarines, the extreme opposite was the answer: to paint her, not for low visibility, but in such a way as to break up her form and thus confuse a submarine officer as to the course on which she was heading. The word camouflage itself was brand new at the time, but the concept of camouflage, of fooling an enemy into seeing something other than what's actually there, was an old one. And Wilkinson wasn't the first person ever to suggest camouflage for ships. Imaginative folks in the field of arts and science had tried it before. Wilkinson, however, got this idea at just the right time. The British government was desperate to stop the U-boat attacks. It listened to Wilkinson's plan, named his approach Dazzle, and said, more or less, give it a try. So he did. In spring 1917, he had a ship, Dazzle, painted with a crazy-looking pattern on one side and a crazy-looking pattern on the other side. These patterns were supposed to confuse German submarine crews about the ship's direction and speed. Dazzle was meant to make the Germans think a ship was, for example, turning towards the west when it was actually headed towards the southeast. U-boats didn't carry many torpedoes. If Dazzle could cause a German sub to waste a torpedo by firing it to a spot where the British ship wasn't actually going to be, and if this happened over and over, then more British ships would stay afloat and get their cargo to their destination. Of course, we have the dazzled ships here, and now the children are eating, and the symbol of the British right here, smiling and happy. The Royal Navy liked Wilkinson's first ship, so it asked for 50 more done up in Dazzle. And it liked those next 50 so much that it asked him to paint every stuff-carrying ship that Britain had with those crazy combinations of black, white, gray, green, blue, purple, and pink. Of course, Wilkinson couldn't do all this on his own. 24 young women who had been to the art school did a lot of the work. They painted designs onto wooden models, and then they copied the best designs onto paper. Each approved Dazzle design got rushed up to the ports all over England, where painters, laborers and artists alike, applied them to the sides of the ships that were being unloaded and reloaded. How did Wilkinson know which designs to use? He had a test. One day, the King of the United Kingdom dropped by to have a look. Now, King Royal V knew a lot about ships because he had joined the Royal Navy when he was just 12 years old. Wilkinson had the king look through a submarine periscope at the painted model on the rotating table. All the king had to do was figure out which direction the ship was pointed in. It took him a while, more than a sub commander would have had, but finally the king had his answer. South by west, decided the king. Actually, Wilkinson replied, the model is pointing east-southeast. King George V had just been told that he was wrong. His Majesty walked over the model for a closer look. Commander, he supposedly said to Wilkinson, I have been a professional sailor for many years, and I would not have believed I could have been so deceived by my estimate. In other words, the king himself had been dazzled. Britain wasn't the only country doing the dazzling. After the United States entered the war, it went for dazzle in a big way. It even used dazzle to draw attention to a ship-shaped New York City naval recruiting station. Members of the Women's Reserve Camouflage Corps did the painting overnight, surprising those who had walked past a gray building just the evening before. Britain, the United States, and their allies turned things around, and Germany surrendered in November 1918. By the time the fighting stopped, 1,256 American ships had been painted dazzle designs along with close to 3,000 British ships. So how well did dazzle work? Nobody really knows. The U-boats attacks stopped succeeding, but historians mostly give credit to the convoys and depth charges. Sorry, sea lions. While the United States said after the war that Dazzle's ship kept a lot of the ships from getting sunk, Britain wasn't so sure. The Royal Navy couldn't prove that Dazzle had actually spared any ships. But some insisted that at the very least, the sailors on those ships just felt better knowing that something had been done had been tried to keep them from getting torpedoed. That sort of creativity is good for more than just morale. Times change, technology change, torpedoes get faster, submarine targeting and systems get computerized, challenges of all kinds get replaced by new ones. But the willingness to tackle problems by trying the unlikely, the improbable, the seemingly bonkers will always be needed. After all, as those of us inspired by Norman Wilkinson's paint job know, sometimes desperate times calls for dazzling measures. I'd like to take the time to look in the back of the book where it says author's note and illustrator's note. And right next to him, I wrote down the author's name, Chris Barton, as well as the illustrator's note. Her name is Victo Nye. So there's lots of information you can read here, and he talks about how after his research, he had to leave things out to streamline the book. But over here, let me move my photo here. Over here is what I want to focus on, these last two paragraphs. He talks about the images that we see, and if you click on the Bitmoji Classroom onto the ship itself, there's images there of black and white images of the ships. You know, they didn't have colored photographs necessarily at that time, right? So while these photos can be enormously helpful, they can sometimes conceal information. For example, black and white photos of dazzled ships don't convey the array of colors used in those designs. Remember, they use lots of different colors to help with the confusion, not to blend in, really, even though they use the word camouflage. Then continues reading, and it says, just as we need to consider what a photograph might not show, we should also give some thought to how photos and all our research finds contrast with the images and the stories we already have in our mind. Research done right does not merely confirm what you expect to see, it shows us things you might not have anticipated. The more you research, the more surprises you will find, and that's exciting. For me, the risk of information overload is always more than worth it. I love that, because you are doing research in school, and sometimes we find very exciting things. So that's interesting. So Victo Nye, she writes about, in hers, there's a video link on the Bitmoji Classroom that you can learn more about her. I found out that she was Asian, and that in her culture, being an illustrator is not really looked upon in a good way. So she had to overcome that to do what she loved to do. But one thing down here that I did not realize, let me move me again, here we go. If you look closely, I'm gonna circle this. If you look closely, let me get my pointer. If you look closely, you may notice a small symbol on each piece of art in this book that's reminiscent of a seal you might find in traditional East Asian artwork. It is similar to the Chinese character for my middle name, and if you turn it sideways, you'll see it's my first name. I include it in all my work as like acknowledgement of my heritage. I was born in China and raised in Hong Kong. That is so neat. I'm going to go back and look. Happy reading, everybody.